Hello, and welcome to Coffee Time. Coffee Time is a space where magical humans come together for some real talk, strong coffee, and powerful introspections on whatever is top of mind right now. My name is Natalie, and I am your host for this channel and today's super exciting conversation. The idea behind Coffee Time is that you are in your favorite coffee shop, maybe cozied up with a book, and you begin to listen in on an intriguing conversation between folks at the next table over. For that reason, there is no big introduction. We absolutely let the conversation speak for itself. And if you do want to know more about these special guests following today's episode, I invite you to check out the show notes for more details. So, on that note, let's dive right in. Hi, Kelley.
Hello.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing well. I am excited to finally be meeting, we'll say.
I know, right? I
Yeah.
know.
It's so funny too, because I mean, like before COVID times, I would, consider this kind of half meeting someone, but now it's almost like the most that we ever could anyway. So
Right.
it's kind of neat to be able to form all these virtual connections. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. So where are you located?
I am outside of Vancouver, up in
Okay, that's
Canada. How about you?
Prior Lake, Minnesota.
Oh, cool. Okay.
Yeah.
So wait, what time zone are you in then? This is really
Central. I'm
okay.
in Central.
Okay.
Yep. Yep.
It's terrible, but I mean, I said on another episode, I think I've only been to Pacific and Eastern, and whatever happens in the middle of the countries, like both, I kind of just don't know about it.
Right. Right. Yep.
Awesome. My cat might jump up. We'll see if he decides to make a cameo. He does that sometimes. He's just currently like, if I'm looking down, he's on
Yeah.
the floor just looking up at me, and I'm like, "Are you gonna do it?
Yeah.
What are you gonna try here, buddy?" Um,
And my dog might bark because the front door is like right there. So
Crazy. I always say like it's real life. Like it happens, and
yep.
yeah. If a dog barks, a dog barks. All good. um, so I know in our messages, and I'm down to just dive right in if you are. You mentioned emotion code, if I have that right, and I
Yeah.
had never heard of this. So like, if you are open to just explaining a bit about what it is, that would be super cool.
Yeah, absolutely. So I just kind of ran into it too. Like, I don't know, like probably last June. And I saw somebody mention the book, Dr. Bradley Nelson's book online and emotion code. And I'm like, ooh, I need to figure out what this is. And so I went out and got the book right away and read it. And it's basically, it's healing emotion and pains through energy work and through muscle. And how you do that is through muscle work. And so, as you are aware and kind of know, all our bodies, our cells are all made up of just energy. And so all of the emotions, the premise or the kind of idea is that your um, all of the emotions and things and events that go on in your life, you sometimes, a lot of times you'll just process it, right? Your body will just process it and you'll move on, and there's not a big nothing's a big deal. Other times, if it's more traumatic
Mhm.
or more just substantial, or you are moving through life so fast you can't process it, those emotions, that energy within that emotion will get trapped in your body somewhere, lodged somewhere in your
Mhm.
body. It's not, a lot of times it's not logical, and you don't know it, right? So then, years on down the road, all of a sudden you have this weird pain in your body, and like for me, it was hip pain. I was having excruciating hip pain at the time that I had run into emotion code, and I was, going to the doctor. I was getting cortisone shot, which did not turn out well.
I've heard that from a couple of people, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, it did not turn out well. And I'm like, well, I'm never doing that again. So, and I was considering moving. I have, a 2-story home, and I was considering moving. I needed a 1-level home. And anyway, so, um, I'm kind of meshing everything together. I'm
Yeah. Do
sorry,
it.
but
That's fine. No, that's good.
yeah, so I read the book and I'm like, this has got to help me. And the book helps you like, um, figure out and know how to do it. Like anybody can do it on themselves,
Mhm.
or there's practitioners. And so I started kind of experimenting, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I think I could do this on my own, but I wanted to see if it would really work. So I contacted an emotion code practitioner, and they did a few sessions on me. And there's also something called body code as well. And so I had an emotion code session, and within 2 3 days, like it helped. I contacted them specifically on my hip pain. I'm like, look,
Mm.
I can hardly walk up and down the stairs. I need help,
Yeah.
and so it's clearing those trapped emotions through muscle work. So you'll ask yes and no questions of, does so and so have like a trapped emotion? Yeah, does it have a trapped emotion that's causing pain in the hip? Yes or no? And through muscle testing,
Mm.
um, you'll be able to find out. Well, yes, there's a muscle. There is a trapped emotion, and then there's these emotions that you go through with a certain chart that Nelson developed.
Okay.
And then you're able to clear it just energy wise. I don't know if you're familiar with Reiki. You can do that remotely.
Excuse
Um,
me, sir. He's deciding now to try to destroy my couch.
of course.
Rude. Yeah. Sorry.
Just like
Um,
kids, wanting to fight when you're on the phone, right?
right? Yeah. But no, Reiki. So I've had on the topic of Reiki, I've had a couple sessions done, like for me and actually also for my cat. And
Oh, cool. Yeah.
it's something I've been on and off toying with actually getting certified in as a practitioner. So
Yeah.
yeah. Okay.
Yep. That has to do with energy work too. That's like
Mhm.
moving the energy throughout
Mhm.
your body. And so it's kind of like emotion code. So um, those two methodologies complement each other. Actually, this is specifically um, is tailored around emotions. And actually, I kind of background on myself. Um, I have had a lifelong struggle with anxiety and depression. And as a result, have had years and years and years of talk therapy. I mean, just I've talked myself out till I'm blue in the face. And so I was like, you know what? I love talking to you, and this is great. But obviously, if I keep having to go to talk therapy, I need to be doing something else. Something else needs to. After I got my hip restored, which I mean, I can't tell you. And I was not a believer, but
Mhm.
they did this a work within 5 days. I was not having pain in my hip. And like I said, I couldn't walking up and down the stairs. And, and then I had other subsequent sessions. And I don't have hip pain anymore. And so that started me like, okay, I'm a believer, right? I'm a huge skeptic of a ton of things.
I
And
think that's
so,
important though. Like I think it's important to maintain a degree of skepticism, and even like
yeah,
on other episodes I talk about like spirits in my house and I have like my natal chart read and like all these things. But with all of that, there's always that like I think the rooting in like physical reality is important. Like I always say, like we're here having a physical, like corporeal
yeah,
experience. So
yeah,
that degree of skepticism I think is necessary. And um it also I think can sometimes like reinforce when you do see the results, because if you go into like okay, yeah, let's just try it and like whatever, but if you go in thinking like oh, you know what, this might not, I don't know about this, I don't know, and
yeah.
then you see the results, like to me it feels a bit more powerful too.
Right. Well, and I'm a self-proclaimed um I don't know the right word. Not an intellectual, like I'm super smart or anything, but like I always want to know more. I want to learn. I want to figure out how does that work? Why does that work? What's the science behind it? Like I go further and further. And so, but with this, like there's so much of a level of you have to believe it works, right? You have to at least have a little bit of like um belief and intention that it's going to work, because if you're completely closed off
Yeah.
from it, it's not going to work. And a lot of energy work, they kind of talk about that, but
Mhm.
so there has to be an intentionality with it,
Yeah.
but there's so beyond pain, physical pain, for emotion code, you address the emotions. There's something called a heart wall, that there's a wall that develops around your heart with, after you have, trauma, or bad things happen to you. There's this actual wall that will build up on, around your heart, to protect you from all those negative emotions, right? But then that wall will also, block off any and positive emotions that you can experience, and things like that. And so through emotion code, you can, clear that heart wall. And once you clear it, it will help you kind of like work through, symptoms of anxiety, depression, things like that. And the reason I say that is because my work through with other people, as well as just my work on myself, I have I haven't been back to talk therapy. I've been able to function. I've been able to, go on with my life and not have to, feel all of that, anxiety that I had felt in the past. And you know, I it's funny because I look at 2020 and I think, you know, obviously 2020 happened for a reason, and I don't think it's just because there's a pandemic. I think there's just like this greater like reason that 2020 happened, right? There's so much opportunity that people have to like look within themselves and work on themselves. And that's kind of just how I approached it. Like, I'm like, okay, we're stuck in this house, four
Yeah.
walls, what can I do to better myself? And one of the things I decided to, become, get certified in emotion code. Um, and then I did. And then it's funny, I don't know why, but I just kind of felt like I had to sit with it for a while. Like, I thought, okay, first I'm gonna, pursue this and do this as a business. And energy work is really exhausting for me. Like, it's very draining. And so I have to work through trying to figure out, you know, am I supposed to do this for myself, or am I supposed to do this for others? you know?
I can relate on that. I'll also say if you're not already looking for a grounding and protection practice to integrate would probably be helpful.
Yeah. And I had been talking to others about that, but I would love to hear your ideas. Like, what do you,
Oh,
yeah,
well, it's something I probably need to do more of, to be honest with you. But and it's funny you mentioned that because this morning I started editing some meditations that I've recorded. I'm doing, and all of
yeah,
these are related to what you're talking about. So I currently am editing the first one that I channeled while I was in my records, which is a womb healing meditation. And by the time this video comes out, it might be published, so I can link them all up.
yeah,
But when you mentioned like trauma being stored in the body, right? And actually, I recently ish started going to a therapist specifically for trauma, because similarly, talk therapy, it was just rearticulating what I'd already done in my head. And to be honest, at a certain
yeah,
point, it was shutting me down from feeling things that I needed to feel. Because I think for those of us who have experienced trauma, uh, a big part of something becoming trauma in the body is that we didn't process the emotions around it at the time that it happened because
yeah,
we weren't able to, right? Like survival instinct kicks in. And so I'd been going to a therapist where I was sharing some of those like darker, we'll say for lack of better terms, thoughts or self talk. And
mhm,
she corrected it. And I had been very explicit that I needed someone who wouldn't correct it because it's like, I need to sit in this because I didn't for the last 3 decades. I
yeah,
fixed it for myself, and that clearly hasn't been helpful.
right,
Um, and so now going into work with someone who specializes in trauma, it is a lot more of dialing back to the body. And I've always been about like, what is your body telling you? It's just I
yeah,
didn't tune into it for myself in this context. So that's been really powerful. But with the womb healing meditation that I channeled, when you were talking about your hips, it reminded me of that because I actually channeled it when I was healing. I had what do they call it? A laparoscopic bilateral tubal ligation, full removals. I had both of my tubes fully removed in December.
oh,
Um,
wow,
and I was healing, and the healing was taking a while. I mean, it's expected; it can take some time, but It felt like
Yeah.
it was taking a really long time. And so working with my therapist, he like suggested a journal prompt, and then I went into my records and channeled that meditation. Um, and it was similar where there was kind of just a switch one day and like all the pain was gone. But a big thing that I had to realize, there were two. So one, and I haven't shared about this online before, so I hope you're comfortable with me talking about it because it's
Yeah,
really
absolutely,
powerful.
as long as you're comfortable.
Yeah, awesome. So one thing that I realized after the surgery and that I had to wait for it to click was that it finally felt like my body was mine. Like I had always been really truthfully like grossed out about that part of my anatomy and that part of my body, and I was so detached from it because it wasn't supportive of the life I know I'm meant to lead. That's just in this incarnation, whatever.
Yeah, sure.
And now it is. But now that it is, it also meant I had access to all the trauma that it had been protecting me from having to process.
Okay,
And
yep.
so it was a really powerful turning point to realize like, oh, I can, one, like this is me now. Like it feels pretty awesome to like be in the body I'm meant to have. That's truly how it feels. And two, it's like now I have access to all those things I want to heal and wanted to heal but didn't know how to get to. And I
Yeah,
have access now and I can start to do that so that I can step into like healthier relationships with myself and others, right?
yeah,
Um
that's awesome.
yeah, but I'd noticed, so when you talk physical and muscle stuff, I'd noticed a long time ago, um my this is getting, for anyone watching, this is getting into, you know, hormonal menstrual stuff. Just beware. Um, I didn't have a regular period, like at all.
Uh-huh.
And I have a lot of tension through my pelvis. I've gone to physio for like my lower back. So like I could relate in my way when you were talking about your hip pain. And whenever I would get a massage on my lower back, I'd get my period. So something was releasing, right?
Wow, okay, yep.
Yeah. And I never really knew what it was, but I figured it had something to do with energy or me holding stress there, if nothing else. So I don't really know where I'm going with all this, but that all kind of reminded me of that. So with that, I also channel the meditation on grounding and protection because I think a lot of us, I don't think everyone, but a lot of us who get into like energy work and healing and that sort of thing, very likely are empaths or empathic, is what you could say. And we very quickly can connect to other people's energy, but that also means that without boundaries, we very quickly can take on what they're
Yeah,
feeling. And I've noticed that for myself as I've gone along this journey. And it didn't start that long ago, it just got launched forward real fast. Was I was feeling a lot of what other people were feeling. And I think that's where that exhaustion comes into place. And I'm noticing that as I'm doing more like records readings for people. It's like I think I need to amp up my protection, my grounding,
yeah,
my cleansing practices. And so I did channel a meditation on that, and I'm curious when I edit it to see how it comes through because I haven't really listened to it since it just kind of downloaded.
sure.
But some general practices, like at least when I go into my records, one that I do is just visualize like a bubble of protection. So like just an orb of energy around you and have the intention that it's protecting you. And similarly, like I will clear spirits from my house or help them cross while I'm in my records. And so I don't want the spirit to enter my records because they could get stuck there. And so
Sure.
I go into my records, but a lot of it, in at least from my standpoint, is about the intention. And so, like when I'll go in before I connect with that spirit, I'll make it known that like I am in my records, but this is a place for me alone. You're allowed to interact, but you cannot enter. And just really state my purpose. And so I
Yeah,
feel like it seems so simple, but I think sometimes just that very clear intention. But having it be very clear, because if, from my experience, if you say the intention but you don't really fully believe it, it's not necessarily going to work.
right,
So figuring
yes.
out like what your intention is when you're going into those sessions, I think could be really powerful. And also just like intention behind day-to-day activities. Like if you do a session and then you shower after, I don't know, like use a salt scrub and like visualize the water washing off of you anything that's not for your highest good. Like those are really basic practices that can integrate into day-to-day life that I
Yeah,
find can help me like at least sustain my energy a little bit better as I'm
yeah,
moving forward. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, when I was going through certification, and
Mhm.
you have to do so many people, and just strangers and things like that. I mean, it's incredibly fulfilling. I love doing it. I love doing it on myself. I do it on my kids all the time. Um,
Awesome.
they're not, they're like, "Mom, what are you doing?" You know.
Yeah.
I'm like, but they they believe it too, because they're like, what does this mean? And especially my 15-year-old is always asking me about it, but they
Mhm.
also think it's a little odd as well. Um, but it's been hugely beneficial. And um, you know, before I ran into emotion code, I was doing a little bit of work on shadow work on
Mhm.
myself and learning about shadow work and things like that. I don't know a lot about it, but I took a class to work through
Oh,
some of
cool.
my own trauma. And that's kind of probably my introduction to really like energy work and
Mhm.
things like that. Before, prior to that, I had gone to a couple mediums to connect with my dad who had passed
Mhm.
away and things like that. And but that was like my extent. And now, like, this year, I'm like, there's this whole other world that has just opened up, and it's just fascinating.
It is. It's also very overwhelming at times,
It
but
is.
it is
It
fascinating
is.
for
And I know I've told you that I stay off of social media. Like, within the last year, I'm just kind of backed away from it. And
sure.
I think I feel the energy so much more being on social media right now, that
Yeah.
it is just draining for me. It is so incredibly draining. Whether I, block different things and whatever, I just feel like, yeah, I don't know. It's just, there's something about the energy that I can't seem to get past. And um, so I've kind of stepped away from it, but there's so much information out there. I mean, like, in, I will see you talking about human design, and I've looked at human design now, and
Yeah.
have read about it, and it's fascinating. And I've, the Akashic records,
Yeah.
and I had my reading done, and then I see that, like, you do readings, and it's like, before, you've never heard of any of this stuff,
Mhm.
right?
And
And
then
then,
it's everywhere.
yeah,
Yeah.
within the last year, like, everybody's talking about it, or at least
Mhm.
the people you're associating with are talking about it, and it's just a whole new world.
Yeah. I feel the same way, and I think I think like you said, there part of it is very likely to. I mean, a lot of us have had, and I always preface this by saying I don't want to discount those for whom, like, the staying home and the whatever has led to, I don't know the best wording to use, but greater difficulties, because there are definitely people who are in that situation and
Absolutely.
they're not able to look beyond the baseline. How am I putting food on the table for my family and paying for the heat this month? And so I don't want to discount that part of what is going on now, and always, really, not
For
just now,
sure.
but I think it's been brought to the
Yeah.
surface now more than those of us who are more privileged have paid attention to in the past, or
Yeah.
whatever. Um, but definitely, I think there has been a space created to look at this more, and so I think that's part of it. And what I noticed at the beginning of COVID was, like, all these extroverts creeping onto Facebook, and I had thought it was overstimulating to begin with, and then I was like, yo, guys, like,
Maybe that's why.
I
Yeah.
can't. There's so many people, more than there was. And then I think also, because we have this space that's been created for potentially a lot more like introspection and developing that, like, if I'm in my
Yeah.
house 24/7, I'm going to notice if there's a weird energy. When I was here for a couple of hours before, it's easy to pass it by.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
we're in these spaces, we're seeking out community, we're building um, more supportive communities when we see that other ones maybe aren't so much. And
Yeah.
so I think that there's a lot of probably factors to why that's happened. But
Yeah.
also definitely the part where it's like, as soon as you start looking into it, even kind of maybe not like explicitly, but you're gonna start seeking out the spaces where it's being talked about.
Yeah.
But it's interesting that you mentioned like what I'm doing, because that wasn't even why I created that Facebook group. Uh, I
Right.
created the group to go with my podcast, and then in
Yeah.
August, I got a records reading done that told me basically to burn down my entire life and start from scratch.
Oh my
Um,
gosh.
and so I did. I took away my business, I took away the podcast, and I channeled the name and the intention of the group. And here we are, I don't know how many, 8 months, 6 months later.
Yeah.
So, uh,
Okay.
yeah, it was all very recent for me as well. But it's fascinating to see how many people are kind of exploring these things, and to be able to, like, I love these conversations because I get to learn the bits and pieces of things that maybe it's not, maybe it is, but maybe right now it's not something I'm directly being called to or that I'm even aware of. But I
Yeah.
get to do this like bit of research and learn about this other way that these practices are being used, which is pretty cool. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, it's been fascinating. And really it's 2020 and 2021, I think it's even just helped to not even just look in introspectively to like your own life, but to become aware of like other people's lives. And um all of the civil unrest that happened in 2020 and is continuing. And I've taken this time to just learn about
Mhm.
open my eyes to all of it. And continuing to learn just of the racial injustice going on in the world and what has gone on in the world for the last
Mhm.
hundreds of years.
Yeah,
And it's
absolutely.
just all of it. And I feel like if myself, if I can slow down and to learn and to grow myself, I can help others
Mhm.
when doing once I can when I can open my eyes. And um, helping myself will help others.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. No, I totally agree. I think that's really powerful. Um, what was I going to ask you? So, because I know you'd mentioned you had questions for me, and I've asked you all these questions about emotion code, but I actually had one more, but I want to give space for that as well. But I was just wondering if you feel comfortable, would you be willing to share a bit about the kind of emotional aspect of what you uncovered when you did the healing on your hip?
yeah, oh my gosh. I mean, yeah, absolutely, I'm comfortable. I took notes and it was pages and pages. I mean, so going back to emotion code, so like when you say is there a trapped emotion? Yes or no? Yes. Then I'll ask like, do I need to know more?
Mhm.
If I'm doing it on anybody, if I'm doing it on myself or other people, do I need to know more? A lot of times it's yes. Okay. Did this and then you go into you have to kind of try to pinpoint like when this happened. Did this happen I'm 43, so did this happen, before the age of 20? Yes or no?
Mhm.
And then if it's yes, then you go backwards, and you go backwards until it's did it happen at age 5? Yes. Okay. So do I need to know more? Sometimes it's yes or no. Did this happen? Did this emotion happen, with mom or dad or a friend? Or you can narrow it down. You can also sometimes you uncover trapped emotions that were trapped with your ancestors.
Mhm.
And um, so then you can pinpoint if it was a generation on your mom or dad's side, how many generations that goes back.
Mhm.
If you can uncover or when you pinpoint that and you can clear those emotions, you clear those emotions from your ancestors and then all the way to up to you or myself. um and then your offspring or whatever. And so for myself there was a lot of um childhood trauma. And it was when I was taking notes and writing down the ages, and after every session that I would have, I'd look into it and I'd be like, "Yep, this is what happened," and "Yep, this is what happened," and I kind of built a timeline on it. Sometimes your body doesn't you don't know, or the person you're clearing the emotions for doesn't know what that would be, but it doesn't matter. It's your subconscious knows, so
Mhm.
you can still clear that emotion. Um, but it was physical abuse trauma. It was, emotional trauma. It was trauma from, like divorce and just all these different things of I grew up in a single family house or single mom household. It was with my dad. It was, all of these emotions that absolutely made sense. I was able to clear. And these emotions, will just show up in just the most odd places in your body. Sometimes you'll have like neck pain, right? And so then because it gets lodged, and then you can clear that. And there's really no rhyme or reason as to why an emotion gets lodged in a certain part of your body. Um, but so after I did the emotion code, then I did the Akashic records,
Mhm.
and I mean it just all kind of ties together. It's just so fascinating and
Oh,
so
absolutely.
bizarre. But then with the Akashic records readings, like I uncovered, like you were talking about trauma, just that was amazing. So, yeah. And so I guess with the questions that I had of you is just like
Mhm.
what your experience in with readings are and just I don't know, very I mean, do you just do them on you do them with other people, right? Not just yourself?
Yeah, I do them for others, and I go into my own records 3 times a week is my goal right now. Because also
Oh,
I
are you kidding?
don't
Wow.
wanna drain myself too much. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, so I mean, it's been a whole big thing, but I guess most recently with doing it, I have been getting a bit more like past life information, which has been interesting because I hadn't gotten much of that before. And I think it's
Okay.
similar to you said, it's like there's a degree of skepticism, but there's also like you have to be open. And I was kind of closed off because I think for me it was like, well, do I really need to know this? Like
Yeah.
I dislike personally when people use these different spiritual whatevers um to dig just for the sake of digging.
Mhm.
Um I don't feel that's how these things are meant to be used. Like, I feel that they're tools to support us now. And so
Mhm.
sometimes that past life information or that, that ancestral information is important for the healing or the work we're doing in this incarnation and what we're doing going forward. Sometimes I feel it's kind of like when like my friend Taylor, who I've referenced on the show like multiple times, she always says, she's like, don't go looking for a specific spirit because like you're gonna invite an imposter and they're probably just gonna wanna like mess with you. And I feel like it's kind of similar. It's like if I'm just going to get the information, I don't think I'm really respecting the practice that I'm engaging in.
Right.
I'm kind of exploiting it. And it's similar with like spirit work. So I think though, because of that, I'd also been very resistant to getting any of that information. But recently that's been a bit of a shift for me. And actually like, I guess just sharing kind of an anecdote.
Yeah.
With my friend Taylor, we were doing a Yule ritual, which I'd never done before. She just invited me virtually and I was like, sure, why not? Um, and her like the candle in her house started going wild every time I would talk. And she's like, okay. And it's like, I'm over here in my house, so my air is not causing this to happen. Like what's going on?
Oh, wow.
And so she kind of opened up to connect. And there was like a whole group of people there who it turns out are kind of like our spirit family. And they told us, they were like, you two have lived like we've lived like all the incarnations together, but we alternate who takes on like the mentor role and who's the mentee, if that's the right word. And
Yeah.
through that time, we've also dabbled in almost like every single type of magical spiritual practice there could be. It's like we've done a different one in every lifetime, which is kind of neat.
Wow.
And so with that, I started realizing I was like, okay, well, I mean, going into the records, there's this thing where you're told, a lot of people are told, you need someone's like full legal name. And there's reason for that in terms of just like the tone attached to what you're saying. So it's kind of like a string of tones that gets you to enter the records. And people have different prayers to enter the records, but they'll follow a tone, they'll follow a pattern. And that's what's like opening that connection. And similarly, like the name is important because really it's like it's the referent like or for this person in this lifetime. Hope I use that word right. But what I've kind of realized through that experience with Taylor is that it's not so much the name as it is the intention behind it. Just like we're talking about with clearing and grounding and protection, right?
Mhm.
Um, because I realized through that, I was like, well, I could, if we have this spirit family that's for both of us, it's not for, and the feeling I got was it's not for both of our souls separately. It's for the point at which we've connected through all these lifetimes. Um, and so it's almost like a Venn diagram. And I'm trying to access the records for like that middle section. Um, and so I don't have a name to go by that, right? Like there's no name. Maybe there is,
Right.
but I've not been told a name for our soul's connection through all these incarnations. So it goes by intention. And I think that's a lot more of what I've been kind of exploring is just intention while I'm going in or any sort of work that I'm doing, whether it be with spirits or otherwise.
Sure.
And then I had one other instance that was fascinating just in terms of my own healing, which was well, there's been a couple, but the one that I haven't really shared about yet is I was shown that night. So when we were doing all of this, first off, they showed Taylor the records and she doesn't know what they look like or could look like. She doesn't even know what they really are. I've just done a reading for her. But she's like, yeah, I'm in this like big wooden room and then like, what does it look like? And she's like, it's like kind of like a big library. And I was like, dude, they're showing you the records. And like they told her, they're like, it's open for you. So that was what told me that we could go
Oh,
there. But she tried to ask more information and the name Ray was coming through and we were kind of like, that's interesting. So I did some reflecting on that and then I realized that was actually a message for me. So with the prior partner, we had planned on having kids, not my thing. But I had picked out a name and
okay.
the initials of the name that I had picked out spelled Ray. Uh, and so when I
Okay.
was reflecting on this, I got a message that was like, you need to, it was basically saying that like I had a daughter because I'd seen someone, like I'd seen this girl, like a little girl, like blonde hair, like running through a field. And it was very vivid. And I'm like, who is this person? Like, what is this?
Yeah.
Who is this girl I'm seeing? And then what came through was that she was my daughter and I had lost her in a past life. And I think part of where I'm at now in this life and my decision not to have kids and all of that. I mean, there's other reasons for that, but I think part of it is because in this life, I need to grieve that. I needed to process it. It's not about moving on to the next one. It's
Sure.
about making peace with what had happened. And so through that, like I was able to connect with her and help her and get some forgiveness for myself. I
Wow.
just got like shivers. That was really powerful. When I said the forgiveness for self, I got chills down my right side. And my right side is always when my guides are reaffirming something. My left side is always when there's a spirit around. Um,
Oh, really? Okay.
yeah, it's just how it's been because similar physical cues, right? Like there's these
Yeah.
physical cues to all these things, and they're different for all of us, but we can pick up on them. And self forgiveness has kind of been my theme of what I've been working on
Okay.
this year. And I mean, with the trauma stuff too, is like self forgiveness. And also then from there, realizing like that people put a lot of stuff on me that wasn't really fair to put on me and letting myself be upset about it because I'm allowed to be. And I stopped myself from doing that before because it would have been too much to process as like a 10-year-old that people weren't treating you well or whatever.
Right.
Um, so yeah, that's kind of where it's at now. So I go into the records, I do readings for other people. But the records have also kind of opened up more generally my um like I don't I don't really consider myself intuitive, but maybe I am. But more like empathic abilities and like clairsentience. And that's how I interact with like my home, with spirits, with the trees that I talk to, like things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's been pretty cool, and it's made sense of a lot of things I experienced growing up that at the time were just scary because I couldn't put a name to them. But now
Okay.
I have reason for it, and I have um, a method through which I can engage with it that puts more control in my hands, and so it feels good. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
That's awesome. No, I you know, I'd like to start exploring trying to figure out how to do it myself.
Hmm.
Um, but that's another one of those things when I think about it, it's so just overwhelming for me that I'm like, never mind.
I think you'll know when it's time.
Yeah.
Yeah, you'll know when it's time, and I'll say like if and when it's time, reach out. Because I mean, I don't teach people how to do it, but I can always lend guidance from my experience, and I know people who are in that realm who do
Yeah.
that. professionally. So there's a
Okay.
lot of resources in our group actually, which is pretty awesome. But
Is there really? Okay. Well, if I would actually get on and like
okay.
spend more than like 2 minutes online.
I can tell you the one to check out so you don't have to be like overwhelmed by information.
Okay.
But I
Yeah.
like what you said too about the social media because that's been a big part of what I have done. I actually have like gone into the groups that I like and intentionally like spam liked a bunch of posts so that when I
Yeah.
go to my feed, only those like three things show and I'm not bombarded by all the other information.
Right.
And I did a
Yeah.
cleansing like back in June-ish. I went from 1,700 people on my Facebook to like just over 600. I just cleansed it out and
Wow.
like I went through my groups and cleansed those out and then joined groups that I liked more. Um,
Yep.
Things like that. Just because I mean, for me, it was important to curate it. And then I also realized, I'm like, I don't really like spending time on Instagram. I use it as an online journal, but it's not a platform I enjoy because there's a lot less, I think, intentional engagement. So I just
Yeah.
spend my time on Facebook now. I don't really go anywhere else. And like, that's
Right.
fine. So
Yeah.
I think there's
Yeah.
nothing wrong with taking a pause. And then also, if you're feeling a pull to get back on it, there's ways to do it with that same intention that you're talking about in all these other practices, which is pretty great.
Yeah. Yes, I do need to spend time. I feel like I did do kind of a when I was still on Facebook to
Mhm.
like, you know, just, unfriend different
Yeah.
people and unfollow different pages and things like that. But it's yeah, I do think it's just that like a season for me that I just need to like
Mhm.
it's hard for me, one thing that I've always been a yes person and just like, oh, they want me to do this, or I need, I'm supposed to do this, or this is how my life is supposed to go. And I think this is like a season for me, like I'm realizing, nope, I need to figure out my true self. And, just that's been, and so I think giving myself permission just to I've always been, okay, what's the next thing? In April, I graduated with my master's. And so now I need to do X, Y, and Z, and I
Yeah.
need to keep going. And, giving myself permission to just stop and,
Mhm.
you know what? Watch TV and do some stupid stuff that, like, like
Yep.
doesn't, like, will just not really even fill up my soul, but just allow myself to just
Pause.
rest,
Yeah.
you know?
Uh,
Um,
oh,
that's been
I
huge for me.
do know. I actually received a message. I was in my records yesterday and they kind of said to me like um it is basically I was like I feel like nothing's happening right now. Like what's going on? Because for the last 6 months things have just been busy 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 in terms of like spirits
Yeah.
in my house, things that I've been told to do, blah blah blah.
Yeah.
And they're like no, like this is it's integration. Like you're feeling that it's integrated. It doesn't always need to feel like chaos.
Yeah.
And it did for a while because it was all new and it was all exciting. And so everything was dramatic. Like if a
Yeah.
spirit came in my house, I was like, oh my God, a spirit's in my house. And now I'm just like, what's up, dude? So it's like, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, mind you, I have a house spirit who keeps things pretty chill and I need to do some things to support him. But um, it's now it doesn't need to be that way. And kind of what they told me was like, you don't need to chase the next thing because it will come to you.
Yeah.
Which on the topic of human design, which I'm not that into, but I find all these things curious.
Yeah.
Um, I'm a projector. And so the thing about the biggest like slogan around that is like waiting for the invitation. So
Yeah.
that
Okay.
seems very aligned with my human design, which was
Sure.
interesting to me. Um, and someone else, Allison, who's in the group, um, she did a live channeling for us and she shared with me too. She's like, you don't really need to look for the next thing. You don't need to be doing active research all the time because it will come to you and it will appear. And so I'm getting a lot of messages like that, but it feels counterintuitive, right? Because I
Yeah.
feel like I should always have to be, it should, my friend said to me when I went through my uncoupling in August, my best friend who I've known since I was like 15, um, they turned to me. We're at the beach, and I was a hot mess because like my whole life was shifting. That's when I dismantled my business. Like all the stuff was
Yeah.
in that month, and they were like, you can just let it be easy,
Mhm.
and that
Yeah.
hit hard. That hit really hard.
I-
Yeah,
Yeah. Because then you realize, do I even know how to do that?
I
Because
did not, which is why I started going to therapy for trauma.
yeah, it is not. I know because I'm the same way. Like I'm constantly having to. figure out the next thing, make an issue of X, Y, and Z. And
Mhm.
yeah, and I think with myself, I had so much trauma that, you said there was all this stuff happening with you in August because everything was
Mhm.
happening all at once. And
Mhm.
that kind of happened to me in 2013. My that was the very same week that I kicked my husband out of the house for the very last time. Was 5 days later my dad passed away from pancreatic cancer, and I became a single mom, and all of this stuff happened, and my whole world just shifted and changed. Now, fast forward 8 years later, and I think I'm just starting to process all of it,
Mhm.
honestly, and,
Oh,
like,
I
figure
can
out,
relate. Yeah.
"Okay, what are you gonna do?" know?
Yep.
So,
Oh,
yeah.
absolutely. And I mean, and I think that's probably one of those instances too when we're talking, it's like you go into survival mode because it's just like, what do I have to do next to just get through the day to like make sure I sleep, make sure I eat. And that was my focus then, was really just those basic things because
Yeah.
more than that was not manageable.
Mhm.
Um, and I think it takes time to get to a point where we can start to look at it a little more deeply and look at the pain and that process and the grieving, because part of that grief process too is that like denial and fighting it, and that's
Yes.
normal. And that's probably there to allow us to just get through, because at the time we
Yeah.
kind of need to. um yeah, but I can definitely relate on that. That's actually 20 It's funny you mentioned 2013, because 2012 to 2013 for me was also a big time that I'm looking at.
Yeah.
Because in 2012, yeah, 2012 I was diagnosed diabetic. 2013 I got sober, and then I was diagnosed with MS. And that's something that I'm doing right now, lifespan integration. We have our first session next week, which relates to that like storytelling of your life that you were talking about.
Yeah.
And I think that's a period I need to go back to, because only now am I feeling ready to feel the things that back then I wasn't ready to feel.
Right.
So
Yeah.
it's funny that 8-year mark. Uh, it's same. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think, part of it is just you just go on to do the next thing, right?
Mhm.
Because if you keep going, you don't have to stop and listen to those feelings that you've been covering up for 8 years.
Oh, it's
Cuz
true.
I know I'm a great stuffer. I mean, I just stuff it and keep going.
Yep. Oh, same. Oh, absolutely same. That actually came up for me this weekend, and this week has honestly been really stressful, and I like almost cried multiple times. And for a bit, I was like, okay, I didn't cry, like, phew, because you don't want to cry in like a meeting at work, like that's not ideal.
Right.
But I'm also like, if I'm at the point where that's coming up so much, I'm like, I need to do it, and I
Yeah,
still don't always know how. It
right.
takes a lot for me to feel things to that extent.
Mhm.
Um, and it takes like intentional time to let it happen, and I'm not always willing to do that.
Right. Right. Yep.
But I think it's progress to be able to recognize that there's something there I need to feel, versus being like, no, it's fine, I'll be okay, and just moving
Yeah.
on.
Yeah.
So it's those little baby steps.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
because acknowledging it is the hard work. So
Mhm.
acknowledging it and working through, and it's exhausting.
Yep, and that's where that pause and then watching TV, or like one of my favorites, honestly, is just like laying on the floor looking up at my ceiling. And I think too, the feedback of being on the ground,
Yeah,
like at a chemical response level, is good because there's like that pressure. And
for
so
sure.
it's comforting, it's self-soothing. And I'm like,
Yeah,
there's nothing wrong with that. Like,
right. Giving yourself permission. Yep.
yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's beautiful. Well, thank you so much for sharing all of this. It's been really lovely chatting and getting to know you and like
Yeah.
talking emotion code, because I honestly had no idea what it was, and it seems, I don't know, really powerful and actually really interesting to me, because it's kind of aligned with a lot of what I'm about. So I really
Yeah.
appreciate you sharing all
If
that
you
information.
ever want me to, do any kind of session on you, I'm absolutely willing to do that. So, but yeah, our conversation just kind of went all over the place, but I really
That's
enjoyed it.
perfect.
Yeah.
That's how it goes, especially when I'm caffeinated. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Great.
No,
Yeah.
I really
Awesome.
appreciate it and appreciate you taking the time. Thank you so much.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode of Coffee Time. Before you leave, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. And if today's show resonated, I invite you to drop into the comment section and share whatever personal introspection came up for you today. Anything you can do to help make the show more accessible is super duper appreciated. Until next time, I am your host and coffee drinking companion, Natalie, wishing you a beautifully caffeinated day.